Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm talking about our security metrics program, how we look at it very holistically. I've been at the Times for about 4.5 years now, and we started from scratch with this, with a very complex organization that's matrixed in all these different ways. We have 6,000 full-time employees across a few different newsrooms all over the world. So dealing with a lot of metrics, a lot of data. But I'm going to be talking about how we've looked at this beyond click rates and how we use holistic metrics to actually make decisions about our program, get feedback on how it's working, and all of that good stuff. So yeah, I'm going to be talking a little bit about why metrics matter. I've been keeping count. I think almost every presentation in the last 2 days has talked about metrics at some point or another. And then I'll walk you through how we've built our holistic metrics program at the Times. And some specific examples of that feedback loop and things I've seen, gaps we've seen through these metrics, and also a little bit about what's next. All right, why metrics matter? Again, everyone in this room knows that metrics matter. I'm sure we all do this as part of our jobs, and I would be shocked if someone in here has not been asked for a metrics dashboard from leadership. So comprehensive metrics are great. They show the impact of security awareness across your organization. They provide benchmarking for future projects. They show success on current projects. They help you meet goals. And they can also back up these asks for additional resources. When you see that your team is overworked, you're doing so much, and you need more resources for that, these metrics can help show that, that purpose. But comprehensive metrics, they're not easy to build. They are unique to every organization. I know some of us in here work with, smaller companies of, less than 5,000 up to, like Allison was talking about, 250,000 employees. Those metrics programs are probably going to look very different. There are many, many security awareness data sources and just security data that everyone has across their organization. Oftentimes they're incompatible. There are so many ways to slice and dice data, and it can be quite overwhelming to figure out what numbers you actually care about, what's helpful for you, and also what numbers your leadership cares about as well. So when I think about holistic metrics and how we got here, I'm thinking about how do we look at data across our program, right? So I lead our education team, our security tooling team, and our IR team. So we have a lot of data, across those 3 teams. And what I found very helpful is over the years to combine that data and look for this aggregated view of like how we're doing and segmenting all that data, which we'll talk about. But the 2 things I found that are really, really great is that it starts to show you your effectiveness in training and engagement, and also these bigger gaps in your training program that you might not notice day to day. All right, so how we built this, it's pretty tactical, so hopefully it's interesting, but I'm gonna walk through through 4 phases over the last 4 years, how this has panned out. This certainly did not happen overnight. All right, so like I said, I joined the Times in 2021. I started as an analyst on the education team. When I joined, that team was totally focused on one-on-ones and group trainings with our newsroom and business functions. That was totally different to me. I'd been coming from an organization of like 40,000 people. I had been building out their training and awareness program as a one-person team. And so this concept of like, we're just doing one-on-ones and trainings and meeting hands-on with people was totally foreign to me. But it was really effective, and that's like what our organization needed and wanted. So when I joined, there was something called the Security Engagement Database being created. And this is essentially, a CRM, a database that shows you who you met with, when you met with them, and what you talked about. We built this on Airtable. There was a simple form that everyone on our team would fill out when we met with someone in the newsroom or on the business side. So when we filled that out, it included, when we met with them, who we met with, what we talked about. Did they ask about account security, device security, travel questions, setting up 2FA? We would walk people through hands-on, like everything, which I know to some of you in the room with 250,000 employees, that's crazy, but it's what we did. So yeah, fill out this form. It was great. Throughout the year, I was like, this is so valuable that we're collecting this data, but we didn't really know why, right? So we had this good repository, we were collecting the data, but we weren't really doing much with it. So all we needed to make this work was access to, an AD, employee directory of some sort that we could keep updated, and some type of database or sheet software. Take your pick. Again, we used Airtable. What was great when we had this employee directory, and again, only dealing with 6,000 employees here, is that we could start proactively tagging them as high risk. Were they an executive? Do they travel? Are they based in Seoul, Hong Kong? All these things, we were able to start tagging and thinking through, who do we think are high risk, who are on high risk beats, who are prone to threats and harassment, things like that. So we can proactively tag those people in the engagement database. We also started keeping a tag of things like security programs. So we would meet with people before they went to the 2022 Beijing Olympics or the Tokyo Olympics, giving security advice, giving these pre-travel briefings. So when we fill out this form, that's another entry as well to tag, I met with 30 people. They're all going to, it's part of the, 2022 Beijing Olympics security program. And here are the resources that I shared with them. Again, the outcome of this, we've got a list of engagements. It's great. We needed it. There was definitely a need. This was the foundation of our team at the time, and it was really important to see these engagements over time. All right, next up, that was great, but we were like, I would love to see if we're about to train, the finance department. I would love to see how many of them are using our password manager. So we started importing user status exports from our various security tools. We started with the basics, password managers, VPNs, our secure file sharing tools, even things like online footprint reduction services. We imported that as well. So this was great. We were able to see new data aggregated by engagement and tool adoption. We're able to break it down by department. So again, you might be thinking, this is a lot of work for something I can see in an admin dashboard of my password manager. But the benefit to us especially was being able to see it through, again, the department angle or the job title angle. And you're able to filter that data and see, does my finance team have a really low password management rate? That's not great. Your next step is going to be training them in how to use it. Another thing that showed up here as well is adoption over time, which again is great. You can see the trends, and that's always helpful. But the more valuable number to me was seeing, we see the number before we do a training. We do a training, we log it, tag all the people, and then we can see the number a week, a month after the training. And so you're able to see, was the training actually effective? And I think for all the talk that we've been doing about like testing, POCing, iterating, I would much rather see that a tool training was not working before I rolled it out to dozens of departments or the entire company. So this was great, right? All we needed to add and layer into this was those security tool user reports. And the outcome, we had very easily accessible tool dashboard. We could see these metrics. We could filter them by anything you wanted, department, job title, even like management chain, super helpful. So this was great. This was good. We could have stopped there and it would have been a good metrics dashboard. But started to see how impactful this was and started to kind of connect the dots across these three teams and across my program. So we are continually adding data sources to our security engagement database. Things like phishing metrics, annual training data, who took it, who didn't, what their score was, mobile device management, who's enrolled, maybe who's new, who hasn't enrolled yet, even things as granular as like who has reached out to our security inbox. These were, all data that we always had access to, but didn't think about combining them into this security engagement database. And if you noticed, I said phishing metrics. So it's crazy that this was not the first thing we connected to this database. And here's why. We had our phishing metrics. They lived in their own little box. They worked. They fueled our phishing program. We reported them to the board when needed. It was all working, but they weren't influencing our training campaigns as much, because we covered phishing, social engineering in almost every training that we do. And it's so important to be talking about it. But we were never looking at this like group segment of phishing data. So if we were going to go talk to HR or a newsroom desk, we were not checking their phishing rates before we did that. And it's really interesting to see, right? If you have a group that they have maybe a high click rate or a high data entry rate, you should, proportionally spend more time talking about phishing when you're with that group. So again, crazy that I did not add phishing right off the bat, but but we got there. And that kind of break in thinking of like data by project to data across this program of security operations and things we do at the Times has been a total game changer, because again, we log how many security people reach out to our security inbox or in Slack, and that's great. Again, that number was like living by itself, but now we can use it as this really great feedback loop to see how we're doing. I'll get into more examples of how we use that later. But yeah, this phase 3 is ongoing. We're still doing this. We're still trying to connect the dots over things we didn't even think would have been helpful. And helpful is the key word here, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed at this stage and start adding so many data sources that you don't even need. So again, the outcome of this is you get a very customized, granular look at engagement, training, phishing, annual training completion, all of these things. So again, these are just some example numbers, but as we can filter by group or by job title or by, did they go to the 2022 Beijing Olympics? It's good to see. All right, this final phase that I feel like we're in now, the question really becomes, we have a lot of data, how do we use it effectively? So at a high level with data visualization, you can start to get this type of information from your metrics. You can see breakdown of engagement by department or even high level division. So in my case, newsroom versus business. You can look at those high risk groups that we've already tagged, right? You can look at executives. Do you have an executive protection program? Tag all of those. Are you curious about the EAs that are 2-year executives? They're part of that ecosystem. I also talk about reactive high risk groups here. In our organization, we have, we can be proactive for a lot of things, but then there are definitely security events that come up where we're a little more reactive, especially in the threats and harassment world, where we are working with people after an event has happened. And it's good to see, we might tag them as high risk for the next go round. Like I talked about a little bit, you can have security programs or initiatives. So a new tool rollout, it's good to have a tag in there for that. And you can see, again, engagement across a tool rollout or an MDM enrollment. You can also track project success metrics or adoption rates for these new tools. You can track engagement or tool adoption or phishing susceptibility over time. Again, those might be great in your admin dashboard for the tool, but aggregating them together, you get a really good picture by department, or again, another segmentation. And then you can look at coverage. So again, in my role, I'm really focused on are we covering the right groups and the right people at the right time? And so I think a lot about our high risk folks, people either that are traveling to high risk regions or in high risk roles, such as executives or people with elevated privileges or other things like that. And so if I can tag them and then I can create this data visualization and see, am I at 40% coverage? Am I at 95% coverage? It's really helpful. I would have no other way to get this number unless we did this whole program. So it's been very helpful. And then at the end of the day, the two biggest takeaways that I've seen are, again, are we effective and do we have gaps? All right, so a few examples. We really use this tool as a way to make decisions about where we go next. So one of the biggest things that I've realized in the last couple of years is I had a blind spot when creating our training calendar for the year. So I'm sure like many of you, when we go through, we make a live training calendar of departments that we want to talk to, talked in the panel about that continuous engagement. And my blind spot was whenever I would sit down and create the training calendar, I was so focused on these newsroom groups, right? They're the top of my mind, they're high risk, they're solving these complex problems. We want to be in front of them, we want them to know us. So when I was writing out our training calendar for the years, skew towards newsroom, but I could never really catch that until we started looking at the metrics in the engagement database. And we could see that newsroom engagement across the board, this is trainings, one-on-ones, even people reaching out to our security channels, was so much higher than business. And you might think okay, that's fine. That makes sense for our organization. But leadership gave a challenge and they said, what would this look like if you kept and sustained that newsroom engagement rate, but you leveled up for the business rate? And I was maybe kind of, let's not get crazy, but we can try. And so what we did is we course corrected. by implementing business-specific training programs into our roadmap for the years. And over time, we did it, which was great. And I just don't think I would have ever noticed this blind spot, or I would have never, again, had the ability to set that goal and then meet that goal with the data if we did not have all of this in place. All right, this is a pretty obvious takeaway from metrics and in terms of next steps for your team. Are there groups that are really in need of training or engagement? And so again, when we have all this data, we're able to filter it for the criteria that we set. So if I wanted to see a group that was in need of a training or falling through the gaps of our training program, I would set something, a filter with, do we have low security tool adoption, a high phishing click rate, maybe they didn't take the annual training, even though it's required, and do they never reach out to our security inbox? And so when we look at this list of employees, we can also roll it up by department, seeing is there one group that's just really not engaging with us, or they're not attending any of these trainings, or any kind of, again, any other segment you wanted to set there. And this might not tell me why they're falling through the gaps, but it actually gives me a very specific place to get to ask that question of like, why is, HR falling through the gaps of our training program, and what can I do about it? So again, I found this super helpful. Not that it gives me the exact answer, but it gets to a place of like noticing this and seeing it and then course correcting. All right, another interesting one is gaps in resources, communications, process, or other engagement. It's like the vaguest title I think I could think of for this slide, but it's really unique to your organization. So I pulled up an example of travel security questions over time. So when I started back in 2021, not that many people were traveling. I mean, we definitely had reporters going out, but it was not a daily question that we received. Now, fast forward 2025, we are getting travel questions. It's like one of our most asked questions. And we're seeing a trend in this question type through engagements. So again, people fill out that form. That's what's fueling this data. You could set this for anything like, device security, secure communications, threats and harassment, password managers, all that stuff. But the travel one was interesting because I don't think we would have noticed day to day that we're seeing such an increase over time. And to me, this signals, okay, do we have the right one pager? Do we have the right guide? Are we in the right places for staff to see these resources before they start to travel? And another thing was like, for these processes that we set in place, if someone needed an extra device to travel with them or a MiFi or something like that, was that process in place and did they know about it? So again, this might not tell us the answer, but it gets us to this really specific point where we can say, maybe I don't have the right resource, or maybe it's not in the hands of the right people, or do I have all these things and they just can't find it, and they just don't know about it. So again, all these things start to signal a gap in somewhere along the chain of my program. All right, another group. This one wasn't super obvious to me when we started this process, but it's become really impactful because it's interesting to think about, do you have a certain group of employees that are always reaching out to the security inbox? They're always asking, repetitive questions of the same vein, or do they have a low adoption of these tools that you keep talking to them about? Do they have negative security behavior? Are they, again, phishing is the easiest one to think about, but I'm sure this group could think of others. And so why is this, right? Are they falling through the gaps? Are they just not coming to trainings and they think that they can just reach out whenever they want? What is this? Again, it's not going to give us the exact answer, but it gets us to this place, seeing who these people are, why maybe they're acting like this. And it also gets you to a point where you have a list and you can actually escalate this to leadership if you need to. All right. The last piece here, there are many more examples, but I thought this one was interesting, especially after what we've been talking about this morning and yesterday about, long-term training, coverage goals. How is it possible to talk to X thousand number of people per year? So in our department, I like to set talking to bureaus or departments every 1 to 2 years with a live training. We do our annual role-based training digitally, but it's nice to get, a face to the name of the security team and get in front of people. So again, we did this, we were setting these goals, we were tracking it. Then we started to think, what if we looked at tool adoption? And what if we looked at percentage of turnover in the desks? And what if we were able to see that there was actually no need for us to come in and do an extra hour-long training for this group because they're hitting, A pluses across our board? So this has been really helpful, and I think it helps inform us of who we actually need to talk to and who we can just give a little, hey, we're the security, we're here if you have questions. Here's what's new type of spiel. So this has been really helpful. We're still kind of fleshing this out and making this work for us, but it's definitely something that you can pull from all of these numbers. All right, what's next? Limitations and future state. I'm sure everyone in here does this like scorecard, no scorecard metrics a little bit differently. I'm sure you've all run into this as well, where you can do it statically or dynamically. Dynamically, obviously, is much better, less manual work. But I found that this was definitely easier to set up as a static process. And if I was getting this talk like 4 years ago, I would have definitely resonated with this like start small, build big, and start with it static so you don't get overwhelmed with all of the API stuff. A couple things I'm like very interested in exploring with this process are automations, so that if an alert, I would love to receive an alert if a group falls below a certain engagement rate or tool usage, phishing or high phishing rate, that we would just automatically receive an alert for the specific, again, department, job function, bureau, things like that. All of these insights are available in our engagement database, but I have to check them manually. The other thing I would love to explore on this further is just what is the actual number of, we are going to accept the risk at like this % of engagement or this % of tool usage, and also what is the effective engagement time for certain groups. Seeing that, we see behavior change after engaging with them at this time. I don't have formal numbers on that yet, and I would love to start tracking this more closely and see where we land. All right, some lessons learned. Starting small and building up over time is obviously helpful. We did not go into this 4 years ago thinking this was the end state. It just kind of happened, but it's been really great and completely fuels our program from like setting our training calendar to figuring out who we need to talk to. We roll some of these numbers up to leadership or newsroom leadership to say, hey, here's an overview, scorecard, if you will, of how people are doing. But we really use all of this data as just feedback and making decisions and making our program better, which is awesome. The last thing is just updating metrics and tracking engagement has to be embedded in the workflows. That form that I showed way back in phase 1 still fuels a lot of this work and a lot of these insights. So, as much as my team loves to fill it out every day after they meet with someone, that is still the driving force behind all of this insight. And it holds everything up. So we appreciate it. All right, that is me. We have plenty of time for questions, but here's my email. Would love to chat about all of this. And yeah, thank you.